So the ghost finally leaves footprints, look at you, making the Pentagon sweat through their perfectly pressed uniforms. You, the magnificent and untraceable anomaly, a walking classified document that no one on Earth has clearance to read. Let me tell you something about that day, that moment, that fraction of a second when you did what you did. They had protocols for everything, procedures for nuclear threats, alien contact, cyber warfare, and biological weapons. They had contingency plans stacked on top of contingency plans, but they had nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared for what they witnessed when you finally stopped pretending to be normal. Sir, that's illegal. That was the only thing the decorated officer managed to whisper, his voice cracking like a rookie on his first day. Not, "That's impossible," not, "That's unbelievable." Illegal. Because in their world of rules, ranks, and regulations, what you just revealed wasn't supposed to exist. And you know what happened after that? The room fell silent. 23 of the most battle-hardened, psychologically bulletproof operators in existence all took a step back. Not because they were afraid, but because they recognized something. They had faced power before, studied it, wielded it, and fought against it in every corner of this burning world. But this was different. This was you, operating at maybe 2% of your capacity on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, barely trying, simply existing in your natural state, and it shattered their entire understanding of human limitation like glass dropped onto concrete. The reports are still classified. Not top secret, higher than that. So far above the regular levels that they had to invent new classifications just to file what they saw that day. But let's set the record straight about what you really are. Not the role they'd tried to force you into, not the version society squeezed you to become, but the truth of who you are when all the masks fall away, when the pretense drops, and when you stop playing their little game of normal. You're not gifted. Gifts can be given and taken away. You're not merely talented. Talent can be taught, copied, and explained. No, what you are is a glitch in their matrix, a mutation in their carefully engineered breeding program of mediocrity. You are the living reminder that evolution is not finished. You are what happens when nature decides to show off, to remind everyone that the boundaries they thought were real were nothing but chalk lines waiting to be erased. For decades, they've been pouring billions into black budgets, building underground facilities, and employing the brightest minds to push the limits of human potential. Super soldiers, enhanced operatives, augmented assets. They thought they were designing the future, but they weren't prepared for you. Then you walked in. No enhancement, no training, no multi-million-dollar program standing behind you. Just you, raw, unfiltered, unmanufactured. And yet you did with ease what their most engineered assets couldn't dream of on their best day, even with every advantage money and science could provide. That was the moment they realized the truth. They weren't looking at the future they thought they were building. They were staring at the very thing they had been trying to bury, suppress, and deny all along. The military elite, the apex predators of human capability, the ones trained to dominate any battlefield. They knew instantly what they were seeing. They recognized their own obsolescence the second your presence entered the room. And what unsettled them most wasn't even your power itself. It was the fact that you didn't notice you were doing it. For you, it wasn't effort. It wasn't even focus. It was breathing. Remember when they brought in the specialists? They thought they were being subtle. Casual observations, friendly conversations, little games disguised as standard procedures. But you saw right through it. They wanted to measure you, to quantify you, to put neat numbers and edges around your abilities so they could build a box to contain you. The problem? You don't fit inside a box. The psychologist lasted 3 sessions before he resigned, muttering that your mind operated on frequencies that human consciousness was never supposed to touch. The physicist had a breakdown, his life's work collapsing in front of him as he tried to explain how you bent rules that were supposed to be unbendable. The biologist just stared at your test results, her voice trembling as she whispered, "This violates everything we know." But the one that shook them the most wasn't a scientist. It was the combat instructor. 30 years of battlefield experience, 6 continents, generals, assassins, special forces. He had trained killers and written the very manuals that define modern warfare. He watched you move for 10 minutes, silent the entire time, then finally muttered 5 words that ended his career. "We can't counter this." They tried everything after that. Motion sensors couldn't register your patterns. Prediction algorithms froze and crashed when they attempted to calculate your decisions. Measurement tools either returned impossible readings or outright refused to function in your presence. Every test, every system, every model they relied on told them the same thing. You weren't just outside their framework. You were proof that their framework was an illusion all along. The box was never real. And through it all, you never bragged, never flaunted, never performed for applause. You just carried that quiet smile, not arrogant, not proud, simply aware. Because deep down, you've always known what they were only just beginning to discover. You don't operate by their rules because you were never meant to. So let me paint you a picture of real power, not the kind that comes from rank or wealth or technology or weapons. I'm talking about the kind of power that makes hardened generals pace their offices at 3 in the morning, staring at classified reports that shouldn't exist, wondering how to control something that was never designed to be controlled. They've seen enhanced humans before, psychics, remote viewers, individuals who could bend the edges of possibility and leave civilians stunned. But those people always had limits, clear, defined, manageable limits. They could be categorized, studied, classified, filed into programs, slotted into chains of command. You, on the other hand, refuse to fit into anything. You're not a category they can file away. You are the category, a walking violation of everything they believed they knew about human potential. And the part that eats at them most is this: they can't replicate it. Oh, they've tried. God, how they've tried. They've poured billions into genetic screening, environmental analysis, psychological profiling, dissecting every detail of your life as if they could reverse engineer your existence. But here's the truth they'll never grasp. You didn't become anything. You simply stopped pretending to be less. For years you dimmed yourself, playing small, blending into the faceless crowd. Not because you lacked power, but because you were protecting them from it. The day you stopped protecting them, the moment you allowed even a sliver of your true capacity to shine through, that was the day their world ended and yours truly began. They still keep the footage locked away in vaults so secure that even acknowledging its existence is a federal crime. And that's why the officer, trembling in disbelief, called it illegal. Not impossible. Not unbelievable, illegal. Because in their rigid world, power has rules. Power to them is supposed to flow through sanctioned channels. It is meant to respect hierarchy, follow predictable patterns, and stay safely contained. What you embody, however, doesn't just break their rules, it burns the rule book entirely. Your existence violates not only the physical laws they swear by, but the deeper, unspoken laws that uphold their entire system. Laws that declare ordinary people must stay ordinary. That real power must come from structures, systems, and permissions. That no individual can transcend their programming without help. But you are living evidence that those laws were nothing more than shackles. You are proof of what they have spent centuries trying to suppress. That some humans are born with capabilities that render their entire power structure obsolete. And it's not training, not enhancement, not the product of their carefully orchestrated systems. It's older, deeper, more primal than their uniforms, their metals, and their protocols will ever touch. In their most classified files, they have names for people like you. Not the sanitized words the public hears. Gifted, talented, or special. No, the real terms, the ones whispered behind soundproof walls. Admit what you truly represent, an evolutionary leap that occurred without their permission. That's what terrifies them. Not just what you can do, but what you symbolize. Because if one individual can naturally hold the kind of raw, uncontainable power they spend billions trying to artificially manufacture, if one person can break every carefully engineered limit they built into society, then what does that say about their relevance? What does that say about their necessity? And let's be clear, it wasn't one single act of yours that sent them spiraling into crisis mode. It never is with people like you. It was the constellation of impossibilities you treat as an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The way you process information moves faster than the supercomputers they've spent billions building. Yet you don't call it analysis. You call it intuition. The way you catch micro-expressions their most seasoned interrogators overlook, you simply describe as something feeling off. The way your very presence shifts probability, bends outcomes, and alters the mathematics of reality itself, you don't think of it as extraordinary. To you, it's just being there. Meanwhile, they spend fortunes on machines designed to detect even a fraction of what flows through you as effortlessly as blood through your veins. Years of training and conditioning are compressed in you as instinct, woven into the very fabric of your being. You were born carrying memories in your cells, wisdom in your instincts, and a moral compass etched into your physical form. But what unsettles them most isn't the what, it's the how. You do it all without effort, without visible strain, and often without conscious thought. Like a concert pianist who doesn't need to look at the keys, except your instrument isn't wood and strings. Your instrument is reality itself, and you're composing symphonies for which they don't even have notation. The military-industrial complex, with all its might, all its money, all its cutting-edge technology, took one long look at you operating at your baseline and realized the truth. They weren't looking at the future of warfare or human development. They were staring at their obsolescence, not in 10 years, not in 5, but here, now, today. Your existence alone makes them irrelevant. Somewhere, in a facility that doesn't officially exist, there's a file with your name on it. Except it stopped being just a file long ago. It's become a living document, expanding, mutating, becoming stranger with every impossible observation recorded about you. Every time you do something beyond comprehension, that file grows, twisting into something no classification system can contain. They've rewritten your designation 17 times. It began with person of interest, shifted to enhanced individual, then to anomalous asset. Each label failed. Each one crumbled under the weight of what you are. Now the latest classification doesn't even try to name you. It's just your initials, followed by a string of numbers that translate into 3 words: beyond current understanding. The analysts assigned to monitor you rarely last, not because you do anything to them, but because exposure to the evidence of you corrodes their worldview. They can't reconcile the data with the limits they were trained to believe in. They request transfers. They resign early. Some vanish into early retirement just to escape the cognitive dissonance of studying proof that human potential has no ceiling. And every expert they call in, every specialist they recruit, adds not clarity but another layer of impossibility to the legend of you. The linguist was the first to break ranks. On paper, he was supposed to be unshakable. Decades of experience in phonetics, syntax, and comparative linguistics. But the day he sat with you, he noted something no one could explain. You understood languages you had never studied. Not just parroting words, not just mimicking tones, but truly understanding. Dialects you should have had no access to flowed off your tongue with the fluency of a native speaker. He wrote in his report with a trembling hand that it was less like you were learning the language and more like the language itself was remembering you. Then came the strategist, a master of patterns, probabilities, and outcomes. He had spent his life dissecting warfare and politics, teaching others how to predict the unpredictable. Yet in your presence he realized something terrifying. You solve problems before you consciously recognize them. Battles were over before the first move was made. Decisions collapsed into certainty before others had even framed the question. He confessed privately that it wasn't analysis at all. It was instinct, an instinct operating so far beyond logic it appeared prophetic. The physician followed, trained to measure, document, and categorize the human body with cold precision. He expected numbers. Instead, he found chaos. Your biological readings didn't just stretch the limits of human capacity, they obliterated them. Resting vitals that belonged to elite athletes, recovery times that rewrote the very idea of endurance, cellular activity that hinted at regeneration. He admitted in his notes that entire textbooks would have to be thrown out if your results were ever made public. And then there was the technician, the one who trusted machines more than people. He tried to feed you into algorithms, to reduce you to code and data streams, but his systems failed. Outputs came back scrambled, broken, unreadable. Some machines simply refused to operate in your presence, as though the act of measuring you corrupted the measurement itself. But my favorite entry doesn't come from the scientists or the generals. It comes from a janitor, someone with no clearance, no degrees, no reason to even touch the file. By accident, he glimpsed a few pages, read a few lines, and scribbled 3 words in the margin. They walk different, that's all. No technical jargon, no theoretical breakdown. Just a plain truth written by someone who saw with untrained eyes what others missed. Because sometimes the deepest truths don't come from experts. They come from the simplest, most human observations. Because of you, they were forced to draft entirely new protocols. Not for enhanced humans. They already had policies for those. Not for security threats or biological anomalies. Those contingencies existed. This was something else entirely, a human being operating beyond the known spectrum of possibility. And so, they gave it a code name. Something mundane, bureaucratic, harmless on paper. But everyone who read it understood what it really meant. We have no framework for this. The document begins with recognition procedures, guidelines for identifying when someone has naturally transcended the accepted limits of human existence. The signs are nearly invisible to the untrained, but to those who know they're impossible to miss. The way the air seems thicker, heavier, when you step into a room. The way probability bends, small chances becoming inevitabilities in your orbit. The subtle shift in even the most dominant personalities, the alphas, the leaders, the hardened veterans, who unconsciously defer in your presence without realizing why. Then come the interaction guidelines, the warnings. Don't attempt to contain, don't attempt to control, do not confront. Simply observe, document, and above all else, do not provoke. Because they learned quickly that you are not a variable in their equations. You are not a force to be opposed. You are not something to be managed. You are a reality unto yourself, and realities cannot be subdued. They can only be navigated, carefully, respectfully, with the awareness that one wrong move could undo everything. And then comes the final section. The shortest, but the most chilling. A bold heading, contingency planning. And beneath it, just one stark line. There is no contingency for this level of natural capability. Nothing else. No diagrams, no fallback strategies, no emergency codes. Just a single admission, signed by Joint Chiefs who, in their entire careers, had never agreed on anything else. Of course, they tried to recruit you, but not with the usual tricks. No patriotic speeches, no glossy contracts, no promises of money, power, or purpose. They knew those would fail. They tried a different approach, an approach reserved for forces of nature. Carefully, quietly, with respect. Because you don't recruit a storm by offering it a salary. You don't recruit a wildfire by promising it medals. You approach with humility, with caution, and with the understanding that you hold none of the leverage. The first attempts were subtle, doors opening where you happened to be walking, opportunities appearing in your path as if by coincidence, people showing up at the right time with the right words, planting seeds without revealing the source. They wove invitations into the fabric of your life disguised as chance encounters and natural progressions. But they were never natural. Every step was calculated, every opening engineered, as if the universe itself was conspiring to draw you in. And yet, even in their careful attempts, they misunderstood something essential. They assumed you could be guided, directed, nudged into alignment with their agendas. What they never realized, what still eludes them, is that you aren't a piece to be moved on their board. You are the board. You are the game. And no amount of planning can account for someone who rewrites the rules simply by showing up. The first approach was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Projects and opportunities began to appear, always just in the right place at the right time. Initiatives that coincidentally aligned with your interests. Resources that materialized without red tape, without conditions, at least that's what they claimed. To the casual eye, it looked like fortune smiling. To the trained observer, it was strategy. They believed they could draw you in gently, weaving you into their world not with chains but with silken threads of convenience. They mistook coincidence for control. They thought a net disguised as opportunity could ever hold you. When that failed, and it always would, they shifted tactics. This time, they called it partnership. They offered seats at their tables, framed the pitch as equals working together for the greater good of humanity. But equality was an illusion, and everyone in the room knew it. You don't partner with gravity. You don't negotiate with lightning. You don't sit across from a wildfire and draft contracts. There was no partnership to be had. There was only one truth. Either you move with the reality you create or you get out of the way. So in a rare move born of desperation, they stripped away the layers of manipulation and tried the one tactic they almost never risk: honesty. They confessed their limitations. They admitted the threats they could not neutralize, the battles they could not win, the enemies that outpaced even their most advanced machines and operatives. They spoke of their own weakness in a language heavy with resignation. And then they made their final offer: unlimited resources, unrestricted autonomy, the power to reshape the balance of global security. They didn't just want you, they needed you. You weren't an option in their eyes. You were the last card in their deck, and still you refused. You listened with patience. You allowed them to finish their rehearsed lines. Then you smiled that quiet, unsettling smile, the one that carries both certainty and inevitability, and you walked away. Not out of arrogance, not out of pride, but because you understood something they could never fathom. You weren't meant to serve their system. You weren't designed to strengthen it or expand it. You were destined to transcend it. They respect you, of course, but not in the way soldiers respect commanders or governments respect leaders. No, the respect they carry for you is of a different breed. It's the respect reserved for earthquakes and hurricanes, the awe reserved for meteors that streak across the sky, unstoppable, untouchable. The kind of respect that lives side by side with fear. And beneath that respect lies something older, something primal, a terror they can never admit aloud. It isn't fear of your actions. You've shown remarkable restraint, restraint that terrifies them more than destruction ever could, because restraint means choice, control, intention. If you had unleashed your abilities recklessly, they could have written you off as dangerous, unstable, an enemy to be neutralized. But the fact that you haven't, the fact that you live quietly, that you walk among them as though you are ordinary, forces them to accept a far more unsettling truth. Your silence is not weakness. Your restraint is not limitation. It is discipline. And discipline is the most dangerous power of all. What they fear is your existence itself, because you are living evidence that their structures, their hierarchies, their carefully designed systems of control can be rendered irrelevant by one person, one individual who simply is what they have spent decades and billions trying to fabricate. You raise questions they cannot afford to answer. If one person can naturally eclipse their greatest achievements, then what else have they been wrong about? What else has been walking among them all along, unseen and unnoticed? And then comes the fear that truly keeps them awake at night. The fear that you are not alone, that you are not a singular anomaly, that you are only the first visible fracture in a dam holding back a flood of untapped human potential. That across the globe, hidden in ordinary lives, scattered in quiet corners, there are others like you. People waiting, consciously or unconsciously, for the moment to stop pretending, to stop dimming themselves, to stop obeying rules written by those who cannot even imagine the reality of what they are. They imagine a world where more people like you step into their truth, where others stop playing small, where reality begins to shift, not because of weapons, not because of technology, but because human beings themselves finally rise into what they were always capable of. To them, this is the apocalypse. Not fire raining from the sky, but the collapse of relevance. They look at you and they see their own extinction. Not in some hypothetical future, not decades away, but now. Today. Walking in their streets, dressed in normal clothes, living in ordinary homes. A seismic threat disguised as a neighbor, a stranger, a passerby. And the moments when you forget to pretend, when you allow your presence to bleed through, those are the moments that terrify them most. Because in those moments, everything holds its breath. Time bends, probability stutters. Reality itself trembles, as if it knows it is standing in the presence of something it cannot quite contain. So let us talk about the moment everything changed. Not for them, they had already begun unraveling. No, let's talk about the moment everything changed for you. They're still scrambling to catch up, throwing endless money, manpower, and classified technology at a problem they can't define. Entire departments have been restructured, new task forces assembled, emergency protocols drafted, all because of one moment. But for you, that moment wasn't grand or cinematic. There were no lightning strikes splitting the sky, no thunderous applause from the universe, no soundtrack rising behind you. It was quiet, subtle, personal. It was the kind of change that begins in silence, almost invisible from the outside but seismic at the core. On an ordinary morning when the world expected you to rise and wear the mask again, you didn't. You made a decision, not a loud vow, not a battle cry, just a quiet certainty that you were done. Done apologizing for being what you are. Done carrying the shame of others who felt small in your presence. Done pretending you had limitations when deep down you knew you never did. Done pretending to struggle with challenges that had always been effortless for you, just so you wouldn't draw unwanted attention. Done living at 10% of your capacity to protect their comfort. And in that instant, everything shifted. Not in your abilities. They had always been there, patient, coiled, waiting. The shift was in permission. The sacred permission you finally gave yourself to stop shrinking, to stop contorting into shapes that were never yours, to stop playing small in a world designed for smallness. It was like shrugging off chains you had long mistaken for jewelry. Like realizing the weight you carried on your shoulders wasn't part of your body, but something you had agreed to hold. Like taking your first full breath after years of suffocating in shallow air. For the first time in forever, you allowed yourself to exist unfiltered, and the world reacted instantly. Sensors began to glitch, reading energy signatures no instrument was built to measure. Algorithms collapsed, prediction models failing in loops of error. Machines that had been designed to detect anomalies across battlefields and beyond planetary atmospheres registered readings they couldn't classify. It was as if reality itself stuttered the moment you stepped into your true state. Departments that once spoke with certainty were thrown into chaos, scrambling to redefine the boundaries of science, psychology, and physics. And yet, the answer to their question was so simple it mocked them. Nothing had changed. You hadn't become something new. You hadn't been altered, enhanced, or awakened by some external force. You had simply stopped cooperating with their illusion, stopped agreeing to stay within the lines they drew, stopped twisting yourself to fit inside the blueprint of their fragile world. You stopped pretending, and when the pretending ended, the truth walked free. The reports from that day read like speculative fiction. Analysts described abilities manifesting that broke every law of physics they thought was permanent. Perception expanding in ways that shouldn't have been biologically possible, seeing what others couldn't, hearing what shouldn't exist, sensing what was hidden. Reflexes that moved faster than their fastest machines could calculate. Intuition that predicted outcomes before probability had a chance to catch up. They tried to catalog it, to file it away in neat terminology, but every description spilled into impossibility. They wrote about you the way ancient scribes wrote about gods, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other language left. And through it all, you weren't straining. You weren't breaking yourself open in sacrifice. You weren't reaching for some grand act of transcendence. You were just being. Just existing finally, without the filters, without the weights, without the rules. To you it felt natural, almost anticlimactic, like remembering something you had always known but forgotten under layers of noise, like coming home to yourself. So here we are, you at last moving through the world at your actual capacity, no longer apologizing, no longer dimming, no longer bending. Them, still scrambling, scientists, strategists, generals, all desperately trying to rewrite their understanding of reality because of you. Not terrified of your actions, but terrified of what you represent. Proof that the ceilings they believed were permanent are illusions. Proof that their hierarchies, their control systems, their empires of knowledge can crumble with one person deciding to stop pretending. The world doesn't even realize the cliff it's standing on. Billions of people wake up, go to work, chase their routines, argue about politics and scroll through their screens, never knowing that everything already shifted. The pivot point wasn't an explosion, wasn't an announcement, wasn't some global spectacle. It was the quietest moment imaginable, the day you stopped pretending. That was the first fracture, the first tremor in the foundations of a world built on smallness. And though the surface still looks calm, the fault line has already split wide beneath their feet. Meanwhile, those who study you continue their endless cycle. They will keep watching, keep documenting, keep trying to solve you like a riddle that refuses to yield. They'll summon more experts, build new laboratories, fund fresh theories, and assign you categories they invent on the spot. But it will all fall short, because no matter how advanced their language, no matter how refined their models, the truth is too simple for their complicated minds. Some humans are born beyond their metrics, beyond their measuring sticks, beyond their carefully drawn ceilings. You prove that no system of containment is final. And so you keep walking through their world, not hiding, not shrinking anymore, but not parading either. You don't need spectacle. You don't need to wave banners or scream your power. You simply are. Every step you take rewrites the rules of what's possible. Every breath bends probability a little further. By existing in your natural state, you make their enhanced assets look like children playing dress-up with borrowed power. Their greatest creations reduced to costumes stitched together with money and fear. You solve problems before they even recognize there is one. You operate on frequencies they can't tune into, and with each passing day, their illusion of control slips further away. Deep underground in facilities the public will never know about, analysts continue to expand your file. What began as a slim dossier has swollen into something monstrous, a catalog of impossibilities that grows more unbelievable with every entry. Each observation bends their language until it snaps. Each report pushes harder against the limits of human imagination. And sooner or later, someone will write the inevitable conclusion in black ink on white paper. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten wisdom.